On today's episode of the Launchpad Podcast, we are finishing our trade grades pod that we started last time, and we're going to be continuing on after the Harden trade with Kevin Porter Jr.'s trade to the Rockets from the Cleveland Cavaliers. So don't go anywhere. We have a great show for y'all today. Welcome into another episode of the Launchpad Podcast presented by Clutch City Control Room. As always, I'm your host, Don Knock. For those who are audio only, just threw up my Clutch City Loggers shirt. Shout out to them. They sent us some nice gift baskets a couple months ago. But like I said, my name is Don Knock. I'm your host. As always, I'm joined by my fellow host, Paulo Alves. Paulo, go ahead and tell the people where they can find your stuff when you aren't on hiatus.
What's up, everyone? You can find me on Twitter at PauloAlvesNBA. That's PauloAlvesNBA. Everything I do, from podcasts to live shows on Twitter Spaces, will find itself linked on there.
And since Paulo is taking a mental health intermission off of Twitter for the week, I am now responsible for all Banchero propaganda. So if y'all need some of that, of course, follow me. Follow the pod at Clutch City CR. If you want the link to the Apple Podcast, Spotify, or the YouTube link, it's in the description of the Twitter account. Again, want to shout out everyone that's subscribed on YouTube. I think we're over 760 subscribers right now, which is awesome. We're trying to push to 1,000. So again, thank you to everyone that's subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do it. Even if you aren't able to watch on YouTube, if you are able to watch on YouTube, do so. And we have been getting a good number of comments. Everyone that heard our call out for comments last time, thank you. If you've given a comment, left a comment, we've tried to get back to a lot of those. I think we've gotten to most of them. So if you haven't heard back, let us know on there or let us know on Twitter. So to continue our trade grades pod, we are joined by the same guest from last time, Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets and the founder of Clutch City Control Room. Jackson, tell the people where they can find your great stuff.
You can track me down on Twitter at JT Gatlin. And yeah, thanks for all the comments on the YouTube channel, guys. It's been awesome. Don actually told me very personally, he texted me and said that he hangs those comments up on his refrigerator now. They're like gold stars for him. So whenever somebody says that he's doing a good job as a podcaster, he puts it up on his fridge, and his mom gives him a pat on the head and everything. It's awesome. So
can 100% confirm that is absolutely accurate.
We're assuming the comments don't come from all of your mom's burners, though.
My mom's burners? Why am I being accused of burners? When have I ever done burners? These are slanderous allegations.
Guys, it's way too early in the podcast to start derailing now. We've got to at least make it to 45 minutes before we start falling off the rails. Come on.
Fair enough. So on the last trade grade episode, we ended with the James Harden trade. Obviously a very pivotal trade in our franchise.
I don't think so. It was small. It was. I think the Daniel Tice trade was more important to the overarching benefit of the Rockets franchise than the James Harden trade. That was just a small blip on the radar.
Paolo had the nice tweet earlier saying how Brooklyn Nets lost the Harden trade both times. So obviously very pivotal for other franchises as well. But another trade that came about as a result of the Harden trade.
Wait, just 1 second. The Rockets actually won a trade they were not involved in, which is the Harden Sixers trade. So that's the first time in history, I'm pretty sure.
We'll have to check on that. We'll get back to y'all in the description on YouTube to see if there's any of those. But like I said, the Harden trade resulted in another trade, as many of you know, in case any of y'all don't. Upon arriving in Cleveland, Taurean Prince happened to repossess a locker, and that led to Kevin Porter Jr. finding his way, whatever you want to describe what happened next as, to the Houston Rockets. So that is our next trade. We had Kevin Porter Jr. traded to the Rockets for a 2024 second round pick. I think it's top 55 protected. Sorry. So a pick that likely will not convey. And the Rockets, as part of that deal, also waived Chris Clemens. So KPJ came back, scored 50 against the eventual champion Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, A-plus trade From me, just because I do not like Milwaukee a little bit. I like Milwaukee, you know, have the Giannis tensions, but I will say, yeah, A+ trade in all seriousness, because we traded basically nothing. We got a player that has started for us for 1.33 repeating, of course, seasons. And yeah, you know, Kevin Porter Jr. has been a fan favorite for some fans, other fans maybe not as much. I, of course, am one who has been a fan favorite of. And yeah, I think just the risk versus reward ratio on this trade makes it very hard not to grade very positively.
Right, and I mean the only big downside of this trade was, well, they had to waive Chris Clemens, and I'm joking. If anybody remembers, we waived Chris Clemens because he tore his ACL, I'm pretty sure. So he was there, but wasn't actually really
I
there.
believe it was an Achilles tear, right?
I think it was Achilles
tear. That's
because
right.
Ray Spalding tore his Achilles like around the same time, and it was
Oh,
like, wow,
he
we had
came
these back-to-back Achilles tears,
he came up for one game, and he's
and
on
then tore
his
his
one
Achilles, and
chance.
I'll never forget that, because he took a step back and it just went.
Gone. But yeah, no, I'll give it. Yeah, I'll give it an A+, just because you didn't give up anything and you got a lottery ticket, or whatever you want to call KPJ. I'm a big KPJ fan. I think the trade looked better at the time than it does now, even though he's played good to close out the season. Back then, the Rockets were in a position where they were desperate for talent, any type of talent, because they had a season to close out, right? And they didn't have anyone with upside to play those minutes. So KPJ made all the sense in the world back then. I still stand by this was a consequence of the Harden trade. Rafael Thompson mastermind. He had this completely planned. He sent out a secret agent, Torian Prince, to bring KPJ back to Houston. They're both from Seattle, I think, as well. So this makes all the sense in the world. Yeah, that's jokes aside. It's a pretty simple an A+ trade.
Yeah, sleeper cell, Torian Prince, making sure that KPJ landed in his rightful city of Houston, Texas. No, right. For all the exact reasons that you guys already laid out, this has to be this. I think this is our first consensus grade where we're all going to walk away giving a trade the exact same grade, and that'll be A+ from across the board. Just because you look at the Rockets and the state of the franchise where they were at last season, which I guess technically now last season is this most recent season. So 2 seasons ago, whatever, the transitional year, right after the James Harden trade. There wasn't really like, yes, there was some excitement, some buzz around Christian Wood and Jae'Sean Tate kind of coming out of the gate strong, but they were kind of, the older crop of young talent, quote unquote. Yes, there was some excitement with KJ Martin, but there wasn't really that pivotal, like, oh, this is a guy that could really be a piece of like this next iteration of the Houston Rockets. And we got that with Kevin Porter Jr., right? He got traded here. It was like, okay, this kid has shown some serious flashes of talent. Like, can he actually put it all together? And then obviously like spent his time with the Vipers. We were watching Vipers games, which is just even absurd to think about. And, the fact that we were more excited at that point in time for watching Vipers games than we were for watching Rockets games at times, which was insane. And then we got to see that transition where he, came up from the G League, started playing with the Rockets, and we really got that first glimpse at like, okay, this kid is talented. Like if he can get his head square on his shoulders, like this could realistically be like the first true piece of the rebuild that Rafael Stone found for absolutely nothing, just because he had the, the issues that he did while he was in Cleveland. So absolute A+ grade for me.
All right, so moving on to our next trade. There's a little bit of a gap here. That trade was in January, and so we go all the way to March 19th, 2021. And the Rockets traded Rodions Kurucs, PJ Tucker, a 2021 second-round pick, which later became Isaiah Todd, a 2022 first-round pick to Milwaukee for DJ Augustine, DJ Wilson, a 2021 first-round draft pick, which became Josh Christopher, a 2023 first-round draft pick. 2021 second round pick is the Rockets' own 2022 first round draft pick is the conditional Milwaukee, which we traded back to them for their 2023 pick. And Milwaukee also receives a trade exception. All right, so this was, the PJ Tucker trade. That's what most people will be familiar with this trade as.
No, I'm pretty sure this was called the DJ Wilson trade.
It was actually the DJ Augustine trade. Wrong DJ.
It could be It could be the Josh Christopher trade now.
Look at how far we have fallen. We were all consensus, like all the same grade, like 3 minutes ago, and now we just can't be on the same page. I hate it here.
Someone's got to disagree. That's how this works. This is sports radio, Jackson. You should know that by now.
Okay,
all
Skip. Right. I'll be Shannon.
Who am I?
But
I don't know. You're the audience. There.
We'll
go back and forth.
I'm NBA Twitter. Just
you're Joy Taylor. You're the pretty one. All right. So, as we said, the Josh Christopher trade. PJ Tucker was ornery, wanted to get out of the Rockets. He pouted a little bit. He didn't get the deal he wanted, all that stuff. So this trade was coming. We didn't know where he was going to get traded to, but obviously this trade was going to happen because they didn't re-sign him and all that stuff. So again, given that we got Christopher out of it, which is like a pretty good draft selection, DJ Augustine, DJ Wilson, not a lot in those players coming back, mostly salary there. Getting off Kurucs, I think we opened up a roster spot, which we filled with Armani Brooks after that, if I'm not mistaken. So not bad on that front. And so I think overall for this trade, I'm going to give it an A-. I think, we didn't get just a crazy return for PJ. Some people were saying we were going to get 2 firsts, a straight first, and we ended up, trading one of their first back and then getting a first as well. So not the best value in the world for PJ. They ended up winning a championship off of this trade to some degree. So, you could say Milwaukee definitely won this trade from that standpoint, but I'm comfortable with an A- on this.
Yeah, the important thing about this trade is, think of it like this. We traded up from 31, our second round pick, up to 24, Milwaukee, whatever pick Milwaukee had at the time, they gave back to us. So we traded from the beginning of the second round into the early 20s of the first round, and then we got DJ Augustine and DJ Wilson, and then we switched the pick we had from the Bucks, which would be this year's pick, unprotected, for an unprotected pick next year instead. So a lot of this trade will be decided by how good are the Bucks next year. Do they have a critical injury and they're not as good anymore? Will they be better than what they were this year, which would be pick 24, right? Will they be a better seed than that? Who knows? But I think back then, Giannis didn't have his extension signed at the time, I believe, so it made sense to trade the pick further back a year in case they didn't win the championship and Giannis didn't re-sign. So if that were the case, maybe it made sense. At least that's what I remember about it. So it wasn't great value for PJ. I think most people expected just to get a late first in return for him. It was on a nice contract, had bird rights, teams could bring him back. The fact that he clearly wasn't happy here maybe took a little bit of the leverage away from Rafael Stone. But I would say overall he wanted to get PJ to a place where he wanted to go, and that was certainly one of the spots he wanted to go to. So all that being said, I'll give it a B, maybe a B+, because we got somewhat an unsurprising amount of value. I would say it wasn't the greatest trade of all time. I think people expected a little bit more, but at the same time, we still don't know the full extent of the trade. And I mean, we weren't in the best of negotiating positions to get maybe what people expected. Maybe that wasn't realistic, so can't really fault them too much on it. It's not a huge mistake. Maybe it's not even a mistake at all, but was definitely not one of their best trades.
I kind of go like the opposite direction of that from you, Paolo. I think I'm probably going to give it like just a flat A, because I think for a lot of the reasons that you just listed out, I think they did get back a really solid amount of value for an aging PJ Tucker, who clearly didn't have a role here in Houston any further because the Rockets were very clearly headed for a rebuild, and PJ Tucker wasn't planning to stick around for that. He didn't get his contract extension, all of that. And the type of player that PJ Tucker was invaluable to, a championship team, and obviously went on to be an integral part of what the Bucks needed to win that championship to get their first title. But at the same time, I think that getting essentially the 2 firsts for him, right? The one that turned into Josh Christopher and then another future first that we still don't know what that's going to look like. That was extreme value for an aging PJ Tucker who, yes, maybe you can look at the Bucks and say that they won that trade like because they walked away with a chip. So like absolutely. But PJ Tucker also walked away from the Bucks. So essentially for a half season rental of PJ Tucker that yes did lead to a title, the Rockets got 2 firsts for that. That's insane value.
They didn't really. Well, they didn't get 2 firsts though. They traded a first
traded one
to a
first
year
for another
later,
one, and they moved from a second to a first
and moved up 6 spots.
My bad. 1.5 first. Then that's the right way to look at it.
They
Isn't
didn't
it?
get to. They moved up 6 spots in the draft, and they delayed the first.
Yeah, from second to
from a
from the
second
second
round
to the first round pick. Yeah,
the 24th.
But it's the 31st pick, so it's basically a first round pick, right? They traded the best second in the draft for a late first, and they delayed 1 year.
Josh Christopher late first. It was a pretty good first.
You don't know if Josh Christopher wouldn't have been available at 31 had they been there, right?
That's fair.
So it was some value, but I don't think it was like anything outstanding. It was the equivalent of trading up 6 spots from top of the second to late first, so 6-7 spots there, plus whatever the difference is between 24, which is Milwaukee this year, and whatever Milwaukee is next year.
I think for me, this trade, it was beyond the value. I think this was a big stepping stone, tallying ledger, whatever you want to call it, just in terms of when when Morey was here, you kind of had a general philosophy, conception of, how Morey liked to do things, how he liked to operate, what kind of picks he was interested in. He wanted to go star chasing. He wanted to trade picks for more immediate things. And, you kind of got used to the things that he liked to do philosophically with trades and picks and things like that. And I think this trade was the first one where we really started to get a glimpse of what Rafael Stone likes to do in terms of picks. He took picks that had some value and then, tried to manipulate those picks they'd already had to get increased or deferred value on those picks. And he's done that again in other trades, including the trade that we're going to come up to next. But things like pick swaps, things like I said, trading from the second round back into the first, pushing a pick from 2021 back to 2023. You start to get, more kind of like brush the dirt off of the stone tablet, right? Of, what Rafael Stone's
really
GM
of the stone tablet, Don? Really?
Let me get these bars up. All right, anyway.
This man was straight cheesing. No, I will say in my notes that I have drafted up for us first, from when we first did the episode, I had to pull up my old notes. I had this right in front of me. I definitely mistyped and misrepresented the information in my notes, which is why I was like, wait a minute. I could have sworn it was 2 firsts. You're right, Paolo. I apologize. That's on me. With that, I'm going to adjust my trade grade down a little bit further. I want to bump it back down to about a B+ because I had the information written down wrong on my notes about the fact that it was just repurposing that first round draft pick from Milwaukee into a later first round draft pick, which I do think still deserves some credit for, again, kind of pushing that draft pick further out. And that's one of the things that we've kind of seen, just as the Rockets have been navigating this rebuild, trying to figure out, okay, as far as an allocation of assets goes, the further out you can get a draft pick, the better off, because then that asset doesn't, it remains liquid over time, right? Because then you still have that first to potentially trade to help leverage another trade further down the line. It is the number one currency amongst NBA GMs to be utilized in trades to grease the wheels here and there, whatever you need. And so had that 2021 first from Milwaukee translated immediately, then the Rockets would have been, potentially stuck with, okay, maybe they got another rookie under their wings. Cool. But at the same time, it doesn't have the intrinsic value that a first much further down the line has. And so I think that does still provide quite a bit of value for what you got for PJ Tucker, honestly.
Right. And what it showed to me was Rafael Stone showed with this trade that he can go get value for a player that's just not your typical, I got a second round pick for this player, I got a first round pick for this player. He went and found a team that if the market for PJ Tucker was low and he couldn't get a straight first, he got the closest he could get. He traded up in one draft and he traded another pick back 1 year, right? He is getting value there, but that's not something that's not common for NBA GMs to just go out and see, okay, I can't get the value that I'm looking for. how else can I extract some type of value out of this player? It was a really creative way to do it, and it showed for combined with the Christian Wood trade for the first few times for the first year that Daryl Morey was not the only thinking head when they were doing trades. Rafael Stone also understands a lot of cap, a lot of negotiation tactics, a lot of the creativity that Daryl Morey had. Stone also has, and this trade also showed a little bit of that. That's why it's a B plus, because in value it's a meh trade, right? But the creativity and the fact that if they took this trade, it's probably because there wasn't a better trade out there, and they found a way to still extract value out of PJ, who was expiring, by the way.
Nah, this trade landed Josh Christopher. This is an A trade.
They could
That's
no,
what I
they
was
could
trying
have
to say.
they could have taken Josh Christopher 23rd if they wanted him more than Garuba, which it looks like they do, considering how their rookie season spanned out.
But they still that's hindsight being 2020. They still took Garuba number 23. I don't want to hear it. It's semantics, but they took Garuba 23.
All right. So we're going to take a break on that note. When we come back, we're going to grade one of the more controversial trades of Rafael Stone's GM tenure. So don't go anywhere. It should be an exciting segment when we come back. And continuing on with our second segment here on the Launchpad podcast, we just finished up the Josh Christopher trade, as we will now be calling it, also known as the PJ Tucker trade. And now we're going to move into one of the more controversial trades of GM Rafael Stone's tenure as leading the Rockets organization. I remember this trade and the build up to this trade very vividly because I was, I'll say, involved in the build up to the trade in a certain way. I remember Woj and Brian Windhorst were on a space, I believe it was, and Windhorst got on there and was like, yeah, the Rockets keep saying how they have a first in hand for Oladipo. I'm going to tell you right now, if they had a first in hand, they would have traded that thing weeks ago. And myself
Also,
and a few others.
Spaces didn't exist yet, dog.
They were in some video or some.
Okay.
It might have been, if it wasn't Spaces, it was Green Room or something along those lines.
All right,
I've always called it the Space.
Oh, it was. I think it was Clubhouse. Maybe it was Clubhouse. I'm not sure. But anyway, so myself and a bunch of other people aggregated this, and then really quick, Woj had to issue a retraction saying, "Oh, the Rockets definitely have a first available for Victor Oladipo. It's coming. Just be patient for it." So all the Rockets fans are sitting there riled up saying, "Oh, first for Oladipo, first for Oladipo." And so that was the expectation coming in, for everyone that wasn't like locked in following that stuff at the time. The expectation going into that trade deadline was, we have this first on the table for Oladipo. So if we don't get a first, this is a major letdown. And so I want to preface this trade grade with, that was kind of the climate at the time. People thought that first was coming. So given those parameters, given, the outlining of that, kind of media environment, the Rockets traded Victor Oladipo to the Miami Heat, his preferred destination that had been reported a bunch of times as well, for Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, fan favorite for 2/5 of a season, and a 2022 first round pick swap option. And that swap is available to be swapped, our pick for either Miami or the Brooklyn pick. So some value there on the swap, being able to switch either of those out. Houston also received a trade exception in this trade. Prod, have we done anything with that trade exception? I don't think we have.
We have. It's what we used to get Daniel Theis, I believe.
Okay, that was the Olynyk trade exception. Or sorry,
I can confirm this in a second.
Okay, but so regardless of that, we'll get to that in a second. Oladipo came to the Rockets, did not look too hot. We had all the reporting that Coach Silas was really high on Oladipo. He's looked okay in the playoffs with Miami this season. So if y'all want to let that influence your 2020 hindsight grade here, you can a little bit, but was not great on the Rockets. Ended up having to get some surgeries done after the season. He's kind of bouncing back now, but overall, a lot of people did not like the initial taking of Oladipo. They wanted future Hall of Famer Karis LeVert instead in that return package. We went with Oladipo. him and his camp really pushed for the trade to Miami. They obviously ended up getting that. So I think for me, given a lot of those things, there was a lot of, like I said, a lot of media posturing around this trade. There was a lot of priming for certain things, priming the fan base for certain things. Given who we did not bring in, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, I'm kind of going to put that to the side a little bit and just kind of try to compartmentalize this part of the trade. Really, the swap has some level of value. Olynyk and Bradley was, known to, I'm sure, everyone that watched this podcast, assistant to the regional tank commander, really made sure that we secured Jalen Green last year. Jackson made the incredible meme of assistant to the tank commander Bradley. I think I'm going to go.
You're going to set my LinkedIn DMs on fire again. Stop.
Hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But I think I'm going to give this trade I'm going to give this my lowest grade so far. I'm going to give this a D+. I think they were kind of in a tough spot with this trade. I know, like I said, Oladipo is really angling to get to Miami. Not getting a first was disappointing, and that is, for me, characterizing some of this grade. We will see what type of value the swap brings. But, yeah, I think D+ is fine on this trade for me. Jackson, we'll go to you next, and then, Paolo, you can talk about the swap a little bit.
Clarify. I want to clarify, right? The swap's not going to bring any value, right? There is no value to be had.
Yeah,
because they the
swap's not triggering because Miami had a better
we're here. Yeah, because we're here now, so it's like there isn't a situation where the swap would have more value because Miami walked away with having such a better record. So in the moment, right? If you try to actually scale back and look at it from the lens of where that trade was with Brooklyn, expected to have their big three in James Harden and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. We didn't know that Kyrie's going to miss 80% of the season. We didn't know that James Harden and KD were going to miss time. We didn't know that James Harden was going to get traded from the Brooklyn Nets, right? There could have been an expectation of, Brooklyn's probably going to finish as one of the top seeds in the East, right? And so then that swap would have had, some inherent value in bumping up, even if it was just 4 or 5 spots, from, pick 29 or 30 all the way up to, pick 24 or 25. That would have had some value. Obviously, Brooklyn, their season, did not go the way that they planned. And so the Rockets do walk away with a better pick than any of us could have imagined. Pick number 17 in the midst of the Kyrie KD area, which is way better than, we kind of chalked up a lot of these early Brooklyn Nets picks to probably being, mid to late firsts at best. And that the juicier picks would be the ones near the tail end of, when those picks stop coming to the Rockets or, whatever, the picks all the way on the back end of the deal. So that said, the swap brought no value, but at the time you could have understood that there would have been some value there. I think that this was probably Rafael Stone's first lesson in trying to posture with the media, right? Because when you look at these leaks and when you look at, Woj and Shams and, these guys different, reporting different things and saying, this team really believes they have XYZ value for a player. I don't think that the Rockets necessarily ever had a true first on the table for Oladipo, right? I think this was one of those things where he was trying to posture and get, get his rival GMs to a point where he was like, hey, I've got a first laying around for Oladipo. So if you guys don't cough up a first, this trade's not going to happen. And, eventually he, had to concede for, a trade much less than what Rockets fans were expecting in the trade, for Olynyk and for Avery Bradley from Miami with the swap. And that's all the Rockets got out of it. I do think that lesson was an important lesson for him to have to learn. And I'd rather him learn that lesson earlier on in his GM tenure with a trade that was kind of, in the grand scheme of things, really just inconsequential regarding Victor Oladipo. Especially when you consider just the fact that the Rockets, when they brought Oladipo in, maybe there was a little bit of that argument there where they wanted a player who could, potentially, low risk, high reward, potentially kind of, pair him with John Wall in the backcourt and maybe make a push for 7-8 seed out west if those three really did mesh. And there was that brief stint for about 6-7 games where it looked like, oh, hey, maybe the Rockets have this new defensive identity and they could look really good together and all that.
I'm sure everyone remembers the wow factor and the commemorative beer that went along with it.
Shout out to the wow factor and another one of the ridiculous edits that I've found myself making over time. But legitimately, right, this was one of those where I think it was an important lesson for Rafael Stone to learn. And I think maybe it leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth because you had a lot of media pundits who then, were coming out and being like, okay, the final tally from the Brooklyn Nets trade, this, and this, Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk trying to slam Rafael Stone. And again, we're not going to be able to judge the entirety of this trade, of the Harden trade and all the subsequent offshoot trades from that until we're like another 10 years down the line. We're going to be revisiting this trade probably every offseason and seeing what new offshoots kind of branch out from the original trade, how the picks have conveyed, what those picks turn into, whether they're actually drafted players or whether they are, packaged together for trading for a big name that's upset a disgruntled star, what have you. So from, for this specific trade in a vacuum, just I'd give it a flat like C. It was not a great trade. I could probably grade it even lower. But at the same time, I think that it was the best value that he could extract for Victor Oladipo, who was not a great asset at the time anyways. And it didn't tie. I think the biggest thing was it didn't tie the Rockets up with any future like salary, right? Granted, they could have just let Oladipo expire for nothing, but instead of letting Oladipo walk for nothing, they got back a couple contracts that still wound up walking away. But then they kept the salary cap clear, and then they also had that little bit of value from a potential pick swap, which at the time, realistically, you could have imagined would have bumped your pick up by about 4 or 5 slots. So,
right, and think about this trade is, yes, it was a bad trade, but it had so little repercussions long term that I can't give it lower than a C. Just because if you're going lower than a C, then you're talking Russell Westbrook trade levels of bad. You're talking, I don't know, you're talking about those really bad trades where you got bad value and you hamstrung yourself long term, right? I think this trade was it was a bad trade. Make no mistake about it, but the impact wasn't big enough for me to give it any lower than this. It wasn't a franchise-altering trade. They got Olynyk, which, well, getting Kelly Olynyk gave us the KP indirectly gave us the KPJ 50 and 10 game, because if y'all remember, KPJ would just pass the ball to Kelly Olynyk and he was absolutely on fire and he would score with it, and KPJ would bump his assist numbers higher and higher every single time. So it gave us, as fans, I think Olynyk in a season as bad as that was, gave us a little bit of joy, a little bit of, this doesn't count towards the grade of the trade. This doesn't excuse.
Olynyk was the flashy, like, let's fall in love with this white guy. He's a hooper before Garrison Matthews was. Like, it was hilarious. He was I remember he was out there like wheeling and dealing like Larry Bird, like prime Larry Bird. Like those comps were ridiculous.
Just for context, right? Let me pull Kelly Olynyk stats. Like, he was insane in Houston.
He averaged like 20 points a game, didn't he?
He averaged 19 points a game. 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. These are all career highs. 2.6 turnovers.
Empty stats didn't lead to wins.
Wait, on 54.5% from the field, 39% from 3, 84% from the line. That amounts to, if y'all want the easy stat, that amounts to
Bill Simmons is disgusted with Kelly Olynyk's stat line because it didn't lead to wins. It didn't impact winning.
So that adds up to.
But Kelly Olynyk played in Boston, so doesn't that mean he's good? How do you add that?
If he played in Boston, he's a future Hall of Famer, guaranteed.
Yeah, and he obviously was leading to wins because he had the Boston, the aura that was rubbing off on everyone.
Yeah, so just real quick, so 67% true shooting, so an insane stat line. And so when you look at the value, that's not good value. Rockets couldn't even sign and trade Olynyk somewhere. Avery Bradley was really bad for us, but he had a team option at the end of the year. If he was good, it could have been an asset if he has if he's shooting 40% from 3 and playing good defense, right, for the little bit remainder of the season. Maybe they can take that option and trade him somewhere. Who knows? But that didn't happen, so they got literally no value for Oladipo, who was playing really bad at the time. So it's a bad trade, bad value, just to see, because it's not big enough to give it anything lower than that.
All right, so that is all of the trades for.
A quick note: you're
off my groove.
The trade exception. I had to come back to this. Okay. The trade exception generated in this trade was the one used for the Daniel Theis sign-and trade later on the offseason.
Okay.
So with that point, then we knock it down one lower grade, right? No, I'm kidding.
Ooh, yeah, that looks like everyone's back at my grade again. Anyway, so that was all for last season because that was a trade at the trade deadline. So now we're gonna roll into the first trade of the new league year, which of course was they traded a 2022 first round draft pick and a 2023 first round draft pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Alperen Sengun, and the 2022 conditional first round pick was the Detroit pick, and the 2023 conditional first round pick was the Washington pick. And I believe it was the Detroit one that was. I think both of these picks had crazy protections on them. Is that correct? Yeah.
So
I know the Detroit one did. The Detroit one had some crazy rollover protections
Detroit
on
one had a rollover all the way until from 2021 all the way until 2027. The lowest it got was top 8 protected in the last year. So it would probably convey, but it was still really protected. The one advantage to picks like this is you own that team's future. So whenever that team wants to make a win now move, you'll probably get that pick to be unprotected, and you get an extra second round pick. I think that was the going rate for the Thunder unprotecting Miami's picks this season. And the Washington one was basically the same, but starting in 2023 and going on for 4 years before turning into 2 second round picks.
Yeah. So I remember when this trade happened, it was like, wow, 2 first round picks to move up is kind of a lot. Or not to move up, sorry, two picks to acquire this pick straight out from Oklahoma City. But once you kind of looked at it, it was, hey, these are the picks that may not convey. You can go on both sides of the fence on whether it would have been better to, retain those picks in hand because, like we said, picks are really good capital, or to cash them in now just because that ended up, not forcing us, but having us drafting 4 rookies, which it became hard to play 4 rookies, right? We ended up basically playing 3 rookies, and Usman Garuba was unfortunately relegated to the G League, and then he had his time with injury later on in the season as well. But the Rockets wanted Sengun. From some of the reporting, they were willing to go as high as 6 to get him. They ended up at 16, still able to get him. So they got their man. And, Sengun had a pretty good rookie year for the Rockets. Some people, such as myself, may have been caught on candid camera saying that Sengun had a little bit of defensive concerns after the draft, but I think he did a decent job answering some of those concerns and answering concerns about translating to NBA athleticism and dealing with that. So, yeah, trading the 2 picks that were pretty low leverage, getting Sengun, who had a pretty good rookie year, I would say I'm going to give this an A flat. Pretty good trade for me.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider the fact that those picks, at the end of their shelf life, right, could have been, much further down the pipeline, taking years and years upon years to convey, and then, if they did just keep rolling over, like I remember the one from Washington, right, not the Washington, the Detroit one was like, like at the very end of it, right? If it made it all the way to the end of its shelf life, it was like 2 second round picks or something, like in the final year of it being conveyed. So it's like at that point, the Rockets would have been conceivably, ideally, right? They'd be, 6, 7 years from now, they'd be well into their contention stages of their NBA shelf life. And what are you going to do with a couple second round draft picks, right? So being able to translate that, even though it's still, some value that you maybe miss out on further down the line, to translate that into immediate value in the here and now in what was already a very deep draft. And to, I think that in the grand scheme of all this, to kind of jumpstart the rebuild with 4 really talented rookies, bringing them in the gate, obviously Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and then, kind of, I don't want to say taking flyers on Josh Christopher and Usman Garuba, but again, really talented guys that the Rockets were able to get late in this, late in that year's draft. And to be able to see each one of those guys kind of translate at the NBA level, obviously still some question marks with Usman Garuba, but I think the value is absolutely there. The fact that they got him at 16 when they were willing to trade up as far as 6th to get him is huge. And I think that you have to go back, and this all harkens back. We've talked about Rafael Stone before and his eye for talent. And I think that he and the rest of the Rockets front office have an absolutely amazing eye for talent so far, where they've been able to find talent in places that everybody else has overlooked it. Obviously, they got KJ Martin at 52. They got Jae'Sean Tate from overseas. They got Alperen Sengun at 16 when a bunch of other teams, 15 other teams overlooked him, right? And obviously, Şengün wasn't, going to be one of the guys going, top 5 in the draft or something, but there were plenty of other teams that overlooked him. So for him to fall into the Rockets' lap at 16, and the double-edged sword here is for the fact that OKC to be the team to make the mistake in trading 16 to the Rockets when they could have had Alperen Şengün themselves is, kind of doubly funny. I'm going to give it just an A- for the trade. I think it was really, really solid overall.
I mean, I won't be as high on it because I love Şengün, but we don't know how good he's going to be in the league after just his first year. He's shown a lot
Obviously,
of
future
potential.
league MVP, just like Nikola Jokic. What do you mean?
Yeah,
Please pander to our Turkish fans right now. Now is your chance.
he's shown us insane flashes, right? And he was also the cost of him was also 2 first-round picks, right? And we know the Rockets didn't value those first-round picks as highly because they were insanely protected for a really long time.
That's the problem though, is they weren't really first round picks because when you go look at like the protections from like the Pistons one, right? It's like, and again, I'm going off the Pistons one because I don't remember all the protections from the Washington one, but I remember they were strict just as well, to the point where it's hard to view those as like legitimate first round picks because you have to weigh the likelihood of them actually conveying as firsts, right? And I think that's where some of my argument was at the beginning, where if you look at these as if you were to go the worst possible route, which is what they don't convey until the very, very end, right? Whatever the final conveyance option is on the pick or on the protections, then we're looking at second round draft picks at best. And at that point, if you're a team that's in the middle of your contending stages and you're trying to leverage maybe a couple extra second round picks that you have floating around, like that's not going to do a whole bunch. Whereas being able to turn those heavily protected picks into a guaranteed commodity that has now translated at the NBA level. It looks really damn good. And I mean, I feel like right now, if the Rockets wanted to, they could flip Şengün for a first round draft pick, like guaranteed. And that in of itself means that I think they leverage their possible value from those other picks into immediate translatable value with Şengün.
Yeah, but to me, it will always depend on how Şengün pans out because it is to protect the first round picks, but I got the Pistons on in front of me. It would have been top 9 protected in 2027, and it stops. It's basically lottery protected. I'll just be specific with it. Why not? Top 16 in 2021, 2022, then top 18 in 2023 and 2024, then drops to top 13, top 11, top 9. I don't really expect the Pistons to not make the playoffs for 8 years in a row. So that pick I was pretty confident, and
you underestimate their power. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, but even
they have not rookie of the year Cade Cunningham though.
Right, but at the same time, let's look at it. The Knicks this year, who were pretty awful, were the 11th
pretty
seed.
awful.
So,
that's
they were the 11th seed. So the pick
very, very PC way of putting it.
You just say they're the Knicks. That would also suffice.
Right, but so it would have the Knicks this year would have conveyed that pick twice in the last 2 years. So what I'm trying to say is
they would convey it twice this year. I was like, wow, they're sending the same pick twice and sending 2 picks. Sorry, my bad. Keep going.
So what I'm trying to say is it is 2 first round picks, and I was confident when they traded for them way back that those would be 2 first round picks. And even if call it a first and a half, right? Şengün is a really good prospect. I believe this will be an A+ trade in a couple of years. But right now, without knowing what his career path will look like, right? I'm gonna give it an A+, an A-. I mean, because I don't know enough to grade it that highly because rookie years don't really mean that much, and I just think 2 first round picks is definitely a steep price to pay. Call it a first and a half, same thing. It is worst case scenario 4 second round picks, which it's not the greatest value, but it's still something. Like 4 second round picks, for it to be 4 second round picks, those teams will have to be bottom 8 teams in the league. So it means that those seconds will actually be pretty good as well. So just from that perspective, it's not a bad trade. It's a good trade, and I'm high on Şengün, and I believe he will make this an A+ in a couple of years. But right now, I'm just not ready to give it better than an A-.
All right, so with that said, we're going to go to break real quick. When we come back, we are going to start tackling the trades from after the draft this season, and then we'll speak on the Stone GM tenure as a whole. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And continuing into our final segment here on the Launchpad podcast. So we just finished up the Alperen Şengün trade at the draft, and we have 3 trades remaining, and then we'll have a little bit of commentary just on GM Rafael Stone's tenure as a whole here. So the next trade for the Rockets was trading cash to the Chicago Bulls for fan favorite, I kid, Daniel Tice. Chicago also received a trade exception as part of this trade. And Paolo, you were talking earlier about how this was the trade exception from the Olynyk trade, correct? That was used in this trade?
Yes.
So, utilizing some value there. It's good to make use of those trade exceptions when possible, right? Because otherwise they're just expiring and vanishing into the void. I'm going to try to kind of grade this part of the trade and the second part of the trade, separately, or the second Daniel Tice trade, we'll say separately. They made good use of the trade exception. You brought in someone that kind of made sense at a position of need if you wanted to deploy Christian Wood as a power forward. So from that standpoint, it made sense. Daniel Tice, in theory, was someone that could shoot the 3. That did not bear out in practice, but you could kind of understand the vision of why they made this trade at the time. Just get some veteran presence in there, get someone that's going to bring, a defensive culture. In the end, this ended up clogging the paint for Jalen and KPJ and Christian Wood as well, and really, slowed down the offense to the point where, people were very displeased with this trade by the end of Daniel Tice's tenure here. So, clogging, Chicago, Christian, these all start with C. So that's what I'm going to go with as well for this trade. I'm going to give it a big C-. I'm comfortable with that. So, Paolo, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, this trade was basically trying to create an asset that they could later on flip, right? They got a water team control. It was 3 years with 1 team option. They didn't use the mid-level exception to get this. They used a trade exception that was going to expire in January regardless. Could make the argument they could have used the trade exception possibly for a salary dump, who knows. But that's really unlikely to bank on a trade happening for that trade exception to turn into something else. I think it would be an unfair expectation. So I'll give this, surprisingly enough, I'll give this a B+. I think it was a smart move. A rebuilding team has a trade exception that they're about to lose. Let's try and create an asset out of this. We get another valuable vet. We can see how Christian Wood looks with this type of big, right? And at the time, I always say this, I don't think when they signed Tice, they knew they were going to get Şengün. We all know that free agency is after the draft, but these deals get made way before. Tampering is a thing. And we had reports from Jake Fisher that this was going to happen before the draft. And then they traded for Şengün, and now they have one extra big. And you can't really back out of that deal because that's just bad etiquette, I would say. You don't want to piss an agent off while you're rebuilding. Just sign the deal. Worst case scenario, I think that was a neutral asset. If Daniel Tice comes in and balls out, you've got an asset you can sell at the deadline. Daniel Tice comes in and is pretty meh or a bad fit, but his own contributions, you could tell that he wasn't washed or anything. The Rockets ended up eventually trading him for basically nothing or at no cost, didn't have to dump him. So it was a low risk, middle of the park reward trade, and ended up not paying off, but they didn't really lose anything to do it, so it was definitely worth the try.
I think it's so important to remember with this trade too that, again, it's really tough whenever you're doing any of these like retrospectives because hindsight is always 20/20, and you got to try to separate the current knowledge from what you have to where. Well, I think it's kind of twofold, right? We're trying to take into account how the trade actually did pan out, what benefits it brought to the organization, all of that. But at the same time, you also need to try and put yourself in the shoes of the organization when they made said trade, right? And at the time, as incredibly high as they were on Şengün and Usman Garuba, both of those guys could have very easily been looked at as project type players, right? And I think bringing in Daniel Tice allowed them the opportunity after seeing what Christian Wood looked like playing alongside Kelly Olynyk for stretches of the season prior. I think they had this idea that, okay, maybe we'll bring in another guy who's a bit more defensive oriented in Daniel Tice, somebody who can kind of anchor that side of the ball a little bit more. They didn't expect him to be that much of a dumpster fire offensively, unfortunately. And I do think that Tice at times catches some strays for his inability to produce offensively, which was exacerbated by the fact that they also had Jayshawn Tate out there who couldn't shoot worth a lick at all. And so they had two non-shooters out there. And that's why, we called it the double big lineup, and that was the train wreck. That was like the buzzword was, it was the double big lineup. No, it was realistically, it was having two non-shooters out there. If you were to run back that start of the Rockets season, even with Jalen Green being a fresh-faced rookie, even with KPJ adjusting to point, if you would replace Jayshawn Tate with Eric Gordon in that starting lineup, I highly doubt they go 15 or go 0-15 again, because it was the spacing issues that caused problems for everybody. It caused problems for Wood, for KPJ, for Jalen Green. The entire team struggled because of that. And defensively, they were actually pretty decent. I think at one point they were like top 15 in the league defensively, like middle of the pack kind of, but their offense was just so garbage that it didn't matter. So I say all of that to just point out that the Rockets definitely had plans to utilize Daniel Tice. Maybe it was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, under the table agreement of, hey, we're going to bring you in. We want you to be our starting veteran center next to Christian Wood, whatever. Even if that role didn't work out for Tice, I think they still would have been content with him being the backup to C. Wood and, being the backup five for stretches of these games as they got Şengün and or Usman Garuba comfortable at the NBA level. And, again, even though they were incredibly high on both of those guys, wanting to maybe go up to 6 to draft Şengün, they didn't know how he was going to translate, right? It could have been a dumpster fire for Şengün, but instead he hit the ground running and he was ready to play at the NBA level. And so because of that, they realized, we need to open up minutes for this guy. And at that point, they decided they were not doing the double big lineup anymore. And that'll bring us to the trade that we're going to talk about here, a couple trades down the line. But I do think that in a vacuum in and of itself, I think the Daniel Tice trade wasn't a bad trade whatsoever. You bring in a veteran presence, somebody who's defensive minded, help kind of anchor the young guys, just a good guy to have around a group of rebuilding guys. And again, he was a consummate professional in his time here. I'll give it like a flat B, because I don't think it was amazing, and I don't think it hurt the organization at all. Like it didn't, at the end, it didn't cost anything to flip him down the line, because he's the type of vet that most NBA teams would gladly take off your hands, for a second round draft pick or something to that effect. So I give it a flat B.
I would say Daniel Tice also partially responsible for the Rockets' safe spaces. So maybe I need to, alter my trade a little higher, given that factor.
Take it away. This is basically not even a trade. This is basically a free agent signing. So
it's a free agent signing masquerading as a trade. Yeah. Which again, we can look at this as, we'll rename it from trades to acquisitions. How's that? And there we go.
It goes down as a trade. LeBron went to Miami as a trade. People always say he signed there as a free agent. He went there as a trade.
He decided to take his talents to South Beach, just like Daniel Tice decided to take his talents to Bayou City. Okay.
Wait, Paolo, did you grade this one?
I gave it a B+.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so the next trade that we have is the Rockets traded cash to the Brooklyn Nets for Sekou Doumbouya and a 2024 second-round draft pick. The 2024 second-round pick is Brooklyn's own, and Brooklyn received a trade exception for this.
Right.
So
let me start on this one.
Go ahead.
Because this is prototypical rebuilding team move. This is as easy as it comes. It's a contending team trying to dump a contract to save a little bit of tax money. Team that's really deep into the tax, to save the Nets God knows how much money, right? And you're a rebuilding team, and you're basically taking a free second round pick for a salary dump that you can just waive the guy, and you're basically buying a second round pick.
For our wonderful YouTube viewers, we have a guest appearance.
Guest appearance, there it is. He was not wearing his Rockets color right there, but sorry, continue on. Didn't mean to distract everyone.
Basically, they paid whatever money Sekou Doumbouya was making for the second round pick and protect the second round pick. Brooklyn Nets 2024. Who knows where the Nets are in 2024? So yeah, it was basically a free asset for something that has no impact on anything this season or next season, because Rockets were far below the tax, so there wasn't. It was For this one, props to Tillman, because Tillman had to clear this, and Tillman just basically paid 3 point whatever million for another second round pick. So yeah, props to him.
All right.
What's your grade?
Yeah, what's the grade?
My grade is an A+.
A+. There you go. Okay.
It's just you didn't lose anything and you got a free second round pick.
These types of at the margin deals are the ones that you can really like start to kind of vet a GM by, right? Where you're like, okay, what like and by extension, like you said, right? Props to Tillman, props to the Rockets organization for actually being willing to shell out more money for another asset, that's not even going to convey for a couple years further down the line. Those are the types of moves that you have to make in the early stages of a rebuild. These are the types of like, we don't want to call them like franchise defining decisions, but at the same time, kind of the same way that we would kind of scrutinize and criticize the Rockets for their unwillingness, their stubbornness to not pay the luxury tax while they were competing and trying to win playoff games and trying to win a championship. You also still have to give credit to an organization who's willing to make, the inverse of those decisions, right? To pay money, to garner assets, and to do the right thing as you're rebuilding. It's the same concept of these at the margin moves that can, again, really help accelerate your rebuilding timeline, because maybe that second round draft pick actually conveys, and there's like a diamond in the rough somewhere, a Herb Jones, if you will, a player who impacts winning at such an elite level that he's a franchise defining talent. No, but seriously, like
we're at a point where Herb Jones is the example of a successful second round pick rather than current MVP Nikola Jokic. That's how good Herb Jones is.
Yeah, because we're talking about future MVP Herb Jones. Come on. But legitimately, right? It's these types of smaller moves that don't really, in the grand scheme of things, nobody's going to remember this move, like unless a future MVP candidate is drafted in with that second round pick. But legitimately, these are the types of moves that are really important and kind of define, a GM, define an organization, whether they're willing to and patient enough to make these moves and kind of reap the benefit of those rewards later on down the line after making a smart move, 2-3 years earlier to help out, like Paolo already, illustrated, an organization that was just trying to shed a little bit of salary. So I think this is a straight, I don't want to call it like an A+, because I think A+ needs to be reserved for like those true like slam dunk trades. I'm going to put it as an A, though, like a flat A. So about almost as close.
All right. So I'm going to agree with most of the things that y'all laid out there. Utilizing cash for trades. We saw them do that with the Kenyon Martin Jr. trade, I believe, as well. So again, here, I just want to kind of reiterate the point of, as we grow as a fan base alongside GM Rafael Stone, just kind of pointing out these things that are hallmarks of how he operates and how he does things. So, trading that money to get these type of assets, I think, is something that he has done, a few times now. Like we said earlier, we point out moving picks up, moving picks back, liking pick swaps. I think these are all good things to kind of to pay attention to as we outline how he likes to operate as a general manager. But Dimboya ends with A, and that will be the grade that I give this as well. I'm going to give it a solid A. I like Jackson's point of, knock it out the park, save those for the A+ this year, because we don't know what this trade is going to result in. We'll
could
see.
His name end in Zumboya Plus, so he could end on an A+?
He could. You never know. You never know.
Terrible.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen. But now we're moving on to our final trade, I believe. Let me just double check. All right.
It is the final trade.
Yes, it is the final trade. So on February 10th of 2022, the Rockets.
I thought we were doing transactions. Where's the Garrison Matthews signing? I think that's it.
This is trade grades. All right. Transaction grades does not rhyme.
I was corrected.
Grades.
I was corrected 10 minutes ago by Jackson.
I uncorrected Jackson. This is
we should have cleared that up before coming in, because talking about the Garrison Matthews thing would have made a lot of sense. But we could talk about it really quick.
Garrison Matthews.
I'll say it. You don't need to look it up. Garrison Matthews was signed for a little bit above minimum deal for 4 years with the team option in the end. All years are non-guaranteed, or I think only first and second. No, all years are non-guaranteed. I'm confusing it with Knicks' contract. So basically, this guy is overperforming in the G League. They sign him to a non-guaranteed deal, which has no risk and is absolute team control for 4 years. If he turns out to be a good role player, nice. If he doesn't, you didn't lose anything. Another one of those smart front office moves, where You just found another diamond in the rough, and you signed him to a contract where he is under team control for a bunch of time. And he came in and he gave us 7 wins in a row, which didn't hurt our tank. So first objective checked out.
No. Garrison Matthews didn't give the Rockets 7 wins. Jalen Green being injured gave the Rockets 7 wins because Jalen Green is such a apparently, the NBA thinks Jalen Green's the worst player in existence.
A losing player.
Not a winning
a losing player doesn't
yeah.
impact winning at all. No, but for all, serious, the Garrison Matthews signing, incredible signing, smart move. And I think it also shows that Stone isn't afraid to make a move that is going to eliminate another player, if that's the best way to put it, because there was maybe some, what's the word that I'm looking for? Redundancy with signing Garrison Matthews when you already had Armani Brooks on the roster. You had that elite, like 3-point specialist, off the bench, spark plug, whatever. But he went and saw Garrison Matthews and was like, you know what? This guy has a little bit more size. Maybe he's a little bit more capable defensively. And we saw that play out where we saw Garrison Matthews start to earn those minutes over Armani Brooks. And there was a stint of time where we saw both of those guys sharing the floor together. And then unfortunately, for Armani Brooks, he just didn't, quite rise to the occasion the way that Garrison Matthews did, as that like instant, heat check bench, off the bench guy who's going to, get up 5 3-pointers in, 45 seconds type, mentality. And Garrison also showed a bit of a proclivity to be, not a turnstile defensively. Like he actually broke up some plays on defense and used his size to his advantage. And I think being 6'5" in the NBA is definitely a lot easier than being 6'2" in the NBA. So, it showed that Rafael Stone wasn't worried about, okay, you know what? I've already got my resident like sniper on the bench, but this other guy I think has a chance to be even better. I'm going to go grab him. And then unfortunately it did relegate Armani Brooks and the Rockets wound up getting rid of him. But at the same time, I think that, again, it does show that Rafael Stone isn't afraid to take a chance at a guy who's already, again, filling the same archetype, if that makes sense.
2 important things about this trade as well is, first
not
of all,
not a trade.
the signing,
honorary trade.
The two important,
not even
important things.
The Rockets traded Garrison Matthews from the trash heap into their lineup. How's that? Okay, so that's why we're discussing this trade. Shout out to Rafael Stone.
I refuse to accept this framing.
Also, the 2 important things actually are, well, we waived Daniel House, which saved a lot of us a lot of stress.
Jackson, I hope you
also
find
freed
love.
up jersey number 4. I'm just putting that out there.
Exactly.
Talk about that as well. Jackson, I hope you find love. Sorry, I'm misquoting this.
No,
it's not funny, but I hope you find your true love. There
not funny, but I hope you find your true love. There it is. So I've got beef with Avery Bradley.
Did you find her? Did you find her?
No, that was House's true love.
No, he said he wanted you to find your true love.
I know, but no, I had not found my true love. Unfortunately, not.
It's very unfortunate for you, my friend. All right.
Did
you grade this? All right, give us one more thing, and then we're going to the final trade.
This is
A.
A
minus.
It's an
A.
It's an A minus. The other thing that we're forgetting is the fact that so this is a cascade effect where we used the Victor Oladipo trade exception to get Daniel Theis, and that made it so we didn't have to use our mid-level exception on Daniel Theis. Had we used the mid-level exception on Daniel Theis, we would not have been able to give Garrison Matthews this contract, or at least for as many years as it was.
Fair enough. So
that's another W.
A
from Jackson.
It's up to an A.
And I am A for abstaining from grading this because it's not an actual trade. All right. Our final actual trade. Daniel Theis was traded to the Boston Celtics for Bruno Fernando, Enes Cantor Freedom, and Dennis Schroeder. A lot. F for freedom. F in the chat for this trade.
F for Dennis Schroeder taking Knicks minutes.
Also, F for Dennis Schroeder and the scrotum cult, and getting blocked by certain individuals behind that.
Scrotum on the podcast.
I'll edit it out. I'll beep it out. Don't worry.
You don't know how to add beeps.
I'll figure it out. Just chill.
You'll hire someone.
I'm just gonna.
Hollywood, okay?
Yeah, I'll hire someone. Don't worry about it.
He'll get his intern to do it.
Yeah, I'll get my intern to do it. All right. So this trade was an admittance that the first Daniel Theis trade probably didn't work out that great. Bruno Fernando had some interesting minutes for the Rockets this season. Enes Cantor Freedom had 0 minutes for the Rockets this season. I think he was waived immediately. And Schroeder came in with a little bit of a spark there. Some of his playmaking opened some things up for a minute, and then quickly he was no longer celebrated by the Rockets fan base as his play didn't lead to many wins. And I think a lot of people also wanted Dacian Nix to get a lot of those minutes down the stretch. So this was largely a triage trade. They wanted to move off the Daniel Tice contract, break it up into smaller parts. Obviously, Cantor is gone. Schroeder likely will be gone. Bruno Fernando.
We cannot grade the Enes Freedom Cantor part of this trade or the subsequent DJ Augustine and Armani Brooks waivings because those are not technically trades. Done.
I'm not grading those parts.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Then get Cantor's name out of your mouth.
You're not gonna get me with that one.
His Freedom, dude.
Sorry, Enes Freedom. But yeah, so I think for me, again, like I said, this is a triage trade. I'm gonna give this a B-. They got off the Tice money, didn't really get any assets.
Is it weird that because you're calling it like a triage trade and everything? I think this was like
wait. How much are y'all enjoying saying triage right now?
I don't know.
I use the word triage all the time. I don't know what y'all.
What are you, a field medic? Like what? Why are you using the word triage all the time?
It's
a good play word. COD like every other day.
SAT
Anyways,
of the day.
No,
SAT word of the day. SAT words of the day.
Wonderful.
Very mad and allege.
Anyways, you're calling it like a resuscitation trade, whatever, a triage trade. I think this was a smart trade because again, if you go back and I kind of already laid out some of this evidence in the first part of looking at the Daniel Tice trade when they brought him to Houston, but they thought that, I think that the understanding from the organization wasn't going to be, Alp's going to be an immediate impact player and somebody that we need to give 15 to 20 minutes a night. They probably viewed him and Garuba as more project style players that were going to take some time to get accustomed to the NBA level when they realized that Alp was NBA ready and that they needed to get him his 15 to 20 minutes a night, even if they were tethered directly behind Christian Wood, which we even saw them, get away from that a little bit more by being willing to play those guys at the same time throughout certain stretches of the game so that they wouldn't be stuck with Wood getting 30 minutes and Şengün getting 18 minutes every single night for your total of 48 at the 5 spot. I think that they realized their mistake, which, in and of itself, maybe doesn't necessarily need to be viewed as a mistake, but just they acted in a proactive fashion to move Daniel Tice away so that they could then open up those minutes for Şengün without having a vet sitting on the bench, eating salary cap for the next few years and being upset that he wasn't going to have the role that he was promised probably when he was originally signed, all that stuff. It was a smart move. And yeah, maybe I don't want to say that it's an admittance of their mistake because I think at the time it wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was more just, hey, Şengün and Garuba, or at least Şengün, is way further along than we thought he was going to be. So we don't need Daniel Tice here anymore. Bye-bye. And they did it. They flipped him without costing themselves anything. So in the grand scheme of things, I thought this was a great way to utilize that asset. So I give it a B+.
This is why we bring Jackson on the pod because he has the inside knowledge to tell us that they said bye-bye at the end of the trade. No.
Are you sure they didn't say thank God he's gone?
Oh no.
They waited for him to leave the restream and then they said thank God he's gone.
What they said? Okay. Ooh.
For those who don't know, whenever
cooked. No, do not tell them. Do not tell them.
I cannot tell them.
No,
okay,
no, don't break the fourth.
For those who don't know, you'll stay not knowing.
Yeah, you'll stay not knowing. There you
go. No. What about this trade? Right. This is a B trade. It's not a good trade. It's not a bad trade. It's, as Jackson said, they wanted to give minutes to Şengün, and they saw an out right there. And before Daniel Tice could become a potential bad contract, they decided to just cut their losses. They could have kept betting on Tice, having him take playing time away from Şengün to increase his value, maybe get an asset out of it, or they could just cut their losses. They didn't lose anything, didn't gain anything. This was already in February, so whatever trade exception they would have already expired anyway, so didn't lose anything at all. And yes, they just decided, no, let's just give the playing time to Şengün. Let's trade Daniel Tice, who God knows how long they could have just benched him, because you can't just bench a guy like Daniel Tice. I mean, you can, but he's not going to be happy for 4 years at the end of the bench without
Wait,
play.
you're telling me you can't just bench a veteran who's proven himself at the NBA level for an entire calendar year?
Or
Not
potentially
no,
two
for
calendar
4
years.
entire calendar years.
Oh, well, somebody should tell John Wall that.
Oh, you didn't have to take it there. All right. Finish up. Finish
No,
up.
yeah, so
Le grade, senor.
I told you it's a B. I also
Oh,
wanted
sorry,
to
I didn't
say
hear
that
you.
we got an upgrade at center anyways with a guy that actually can be a backup for God knows how many years because he'll just be thankful for being in the league.
So B for Bruno. That's what you're telling me.
It's a B for Bruno Fernando. Shout out to him because if I spoke
Also
Portuguese right
speak
now, he would
Portuguese. Yeah.
understand because he's Angolan.
Love
It,
those
it would
Portuguese
also
speakers.
it would also be worth noting that the Rockets, look, Bruno had showed some small flashes here and there. I don't think that that was. I think he was very much just a throw in on this trade, but there's a possibility there if the Rockets want to keep Bruno around, if they want to have him maybe be a project piece moving forward for this team. They've already obviously got Usman Garuba waiting in the wings, who hasn't really gotten a chance to prove himself. But having more young talent and maybe they just randomly found another piece that they could have moving forward, then that's a total win, right? And maybe he doesn't actually translate into anything, but those are the types of like opportunities that you can have as a young rebuilding team where it's like, hey, we got this throw in on this trade and he never really got a shot with the Celtics, but let's see what he does here. And then the legend of Bruno Fernando was born, right? So
And they did choose him over Enes Kanter, who played the same position, and they chose to waive Kanter instead of him. So
yep,
that's fair. All right, so that was our final trade, and now I just want to go around and just kind of having taken in all of these trades, right? We kind of at the beginning of the first trade grades pod, kind of talked about maybe these trades once we kind of go in and grade them trade by trade. Things may look a little bit different than people think going in. So I just want to go around, probably whatever you just thought of, feel free to say it in your section of this. But I just kind of want to go around.
Just came out.
Oh, okay.
The prospects. So
okay.
All there's some big names in here. What the fuck?
We'll touch on that a little bit. But yeah, so I think looking at all the trades as a whole, there were really for me 2 or 3 trades that were kind of the head scratchers. The Oladipo trade, the Tice trade for the second time for me. And then I think there was one other one in the first one that I can't think of off the top of my head. But other than that, I think these trades were largely positive. Stone has put the team in a position where they have recouped all the assets that they lost in the Oklahoma City trade. They had to move Westbrook, Harden, Tucker, Oladipo, and will likely end up moving Gordon next year. We'll see about that. But, been placed under a high amount of stress in terms of players that they de facto had to trade. And, the stuff that they got back, maybe it wasn't always the best returns. But I think this team has been able to find players at the margins. They've been able to find assets at the margins, and they've been able to do well with the really important parts of these trades, right? What you traded Harden for, what you traded Westbrook for, what you drafted with the pick that led to Jalen Green, what they're going to end up doing with the draft pick this year. I think I'm very comfortable with those elements of what they've done, and I think I'm also very comfortable with what they've done on the margins and what they're probably going to do in the draft this year. So those have been my major takeaways. It also would not be a pod talking about trades with myself and Paolo without mentioning not trading for Ben Simmons multiple times now.
That's not a trade, so you can't talk about it.
I said it was not a trade, but the trades that were not, I think I'm going to speak for myself and for Paolo here. I think not trading for Ben Simmons, I'm very comforted that never got, down the track, down the line, whatever you want to call it. Those are my general takeaways for now. I think it will be interesting to continue to monitor what Rafael Stone's tendencies are as a general manager. I think those can be very telling with how we kind of predict and foreshadow other moves that he'll end up making. Maybe we get even closer to that as we get closer to the draft, what he likes in the draft and his tendencies as a drafter. But that's all I have for this one. Paolo, go ahead and give your general thoughts on Stone's tenure so far.
I think just not trading for Ben Simmons would get you a lifetime contract. That's why what's his name, Sean Marks is over there struggling in Brooklyn with the dude that can't play, is depressed, has back surgery, is trying to get his money back from the 76ers. Combination of factors. No, but yeah, it's just I'm happy with Rafael Stone here. If I had to choose right now, I would extend him. It's just the key traits, he got them right. And part of this comes from him getting lucky in the lottery. That's part of being a GM. If you're lucky in the lottery, you're lucky in the lottery. Then there's no major mistakes. And I think people expect GMs to nail every single trade every single time. People expect your GM to be the one doing all the fleecing. A good example of this was back when Cam Reddish was traded and people thought that was a cheap price. They were like, "Oh, why didn't Rafael Stone trade for him?" I think those are not realistic expectations. What you can expect from your GM, you can expect him not to make any franchise altering mistakes. That's what you can expect that, and you can expect a reasonable hit rate on his trades, and that's what Rafael Stone's done more than that. He's picked the correct path between the two, the correct main path between the two, between the Simmons trade and the Harden trade, and the Simmons trade and the Brooklyn trade. He chose the right one. Did he nail every single specific? No, but he chose the right path. The general direction is well chosen. And then he nailed a couple of trades. He nailed the trade that landed as Christian Wood, and then he nailed the draft. And you can have a different opinion on that, but I think he nailed the draft. Those are the two most important things for the three. So the two biggest things for this franchise so far were the Harden trade and the draft, and he nailed both. After that, the second biggest trade that they have gone through was the Roku for Christian Wood and 2 first trade. That's unbelievable value when you look at it that way. And so, what else can you expect? Could he have gotten Caris LeVert and maybe held on to him and traded him for an extra first round pick? Yes, he could. Could he also have taken Ben Simmons and right now we're trying to build a team around John Wall, Ben Simmons, and Christian Wood? That could also be a thing. So which scenario would you rather have? So yeah, that being said, draft was a big deal. He nailed it. Let's see how this next draft goes. Coaching hire, who knows? Because when he hired the coach, he was for a different team. I am of the firm belief that Salas with James Harden would have made a playoff contender. Who knows if it would have been better than what Mike D'Antoni did, but he is definitely with Christian Wood as well. I think Salas would have been a perfect coach for that situation. He was the guy I wanted to get hired back then. I think it's just good so far. A bunch of question marks. Next year's draft, the roster is loaded with talent. The roster, 2 more guys coming in. They'll need to trade some guys for playing to free up playing time. Let's see how that goes. And then next coaching hire, is it still Salas? How does this transition after next year into being a good team? Can they do it? Will we give a top 10 pick to the OKC Thunder in 2024? These are all big questions that remain unanswered, but I think so far we're pretty blessed to have gotten Rafael Stone, and I think that's the one thing that could maybe make me question my fandom being from overseas is, well, I could not be a Kings fan, and if the Rockets are not the Kings, quite differently, I'd say that they have easily a top 8 GM in the league in this reign so far. So that's all I could ask for, and I think we got really lucky in that regard.
All right.
To echo similar sentiments, I think there are just a lot of big questions kind of looming in the not so distant future for the Rockets and for Rafael Stone specifically. I kind of almost think that like Rafael Stone was tasked with, a monumental decision so early on in his GM tenure, right, with the James Harden situation. And I think he did pass that with flying colors, because the worst thing you can do is hamstring your organization and put them in a position where you have a very predetermined ceiling, right? Where I think, Ben Simmons is your best player, and building around a core of the Simmons, Wall, and Wood would have had a very low ceiling of where that team could have conceivably gotten to. And I think ultimately while it was a tough sell at the time and while he got a lot of flame for it, it was the right decision to not take Ben Simmons, to give this organization the flexibility it needed over time to go through a rebuild, quote unquote, the right way and bottom out and cultivate talent and build it from the ground up. And I think ultimately since that decision, there's been kind of like a lot. I think it's almost been like maybe not cruise control for Rafael Stone, but there haven't really been, apart from the draft is really important, right? And from a talent evaluation perspective, I mentioned that earlier. I think he's done a fantastic job there. I think from his seat as the general manager, this next year or so is going to be big, right? It's about how those pieces start to fit together. It's about making decisions to start consolidating with the roster, like having to decide, okay, are we going to trade this guy? Are we going to move on from this guy? Which guys are we going to package? Who's here for the long term? Who are we trying to get out the door? Those are going to be some big decisions that he's going to start being faced with here in the next year or so, because like Paolo alluded to, right? The Rockets are probably bringing in 2 more draft picks this season. That means they'll have a total of 9 sophomores and rookies? No, sophomores, rookies, and juniors, if you count KJ Martin and Jae'Sean Tate as well. That's almost 2/3 of your roster are all brand new players, essentially. So at what point do you start consolidating the roster, figuring out what you're going to do with certain guys, who's here, who's going to go, all of that. And then ultimately, need to start making the decisions, the big decisions, right? When do they make a push for trying to trade for an established player to bring in with this crop of young guys and try and take that next jump back into relevancy? Do they, how much longer do they hold on to Steven Silas, right? Because was he, the right hire for James Harden and company? Maybe. Was he the right guy for, the developmental role of head coach? I mean, I think so far everybody's improved, but, much to the chagrin of Rockets fans everywhere, a lot of people are kind of out on Steven Silas at this point. I don't know if Steven Silas is suddenly going to look like a better overall coach once the Rockets are in a position where they're, winning and not focused as much on development, right? And I think there's been kind of a tear, or maybe not a disconnect, but just at times it's felt like Steven Silas has been coaching, especially at the beginning part of the season, coaching to win games and not succeeding and not prioritizing development, which was very frustrating for people who thought that this was going to be a developmental season with just a gigantic focus placed on the young guys and all this. So I think there's a lot looming in the not so distant horizon for Rafael Stone that'll be some big decisions that he's got to make with his, GM career, which is again, either replacing Steven Silas with another head coach and, figuring out the direction of the organization there, deciding what to do with the, remainder of the Brooklyn Nets draft stash capital and flipping that for an established star player possibly, and bringing in somebody, a big name to kind of jumpstart, or maybe not jumpstart the rebuild, but again, to help, grow the rebuild and keep pushing in the right direction back towards relevancy, and figuring out just the general timeline of the rebuild. So those are just some of my general thoughts on where Rafael Stone is at. But overall, I think you got to feel very confident about the decisions that he's made so far as the Rockets general manager.
All right. So I think we're going to hold off on the combine stuff. We'll save it for another time. We've gone not a little long, but about time here. So run through the plugs real quick and get everyone out of here. So, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find the pod at Clutch City CR in the description of there on Twitter. You can find the Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube link. Again, thank you for everyone subscribed and watch on YouTube. Paolo, go ahead and tell the people where they can find your stuff one more time.
Yeah, y'all can find me on Twitter at PaulAlvesNBA. That's PaulAlvesNBA. Everything I do, from podcasts like this one to live shows on Twitter Spaces, will find itself linked on there.
And Jackson.
Whoop! I pressed the wrong button. That was fun. What a way to end the show. So you can find me on Twitter at JT Gatlin. Of course, all the stuff that I yell about is there. Locked on Rockets, Locked on NBA, State of the Rockets, as well as everything we do for Clutch City Control Room.
Perfect. So until next time, everyone be safe and go Rockets.